very well be very literal, and that's for the individual to decide. But that model is very useful because it shows us that when the demiurge created, he did it to the blueprint, but he didn't have the male-female harmony. And so we get created from a world that was from the dark feminine shadow, which the ironic result of is that we end up with the dark masculine shadow, and we live in a world run by disturbed men, basically. And that is one description of tracing that root back. And in my discussion of this in an essay earlier this year, or maybe last year, I can't remember. It won't be this year. It was 2010 or 11. You could kind of think of it in that the creator, if you want to think of it in that way, or the divine source, or the underlying architecture, the physics, whatever, knew that this kind of problem had occurred and thought, instead of like reformatting the hard drive and just thinking, oh, well, there was just a fuck up there, so let's get rid of it, he kind of thought, that's interesting. That's really curious what's happened over there. So what I'll do is I'll send in sentient beings who have the perfect algorithm, the perfect male, female, innocent, empowered unity of free will into that corrupted system and see if they can heal it from the inside out. So in Gnostic tracts and in Gnostic teachings, they call them the beautiful or the pure innocent spirits, which just means that there are some beings on earth who came in pure, quite a lot of them, walking around the place, who don't necessarily succumb to the conditioning quite as heavily as everyone else does. And so they spread this kind of awareness. And you could say, well, maybe we know a lot of those people. Maybe it's a lot more common and a lot more normal than we think. And that spreading of illumination, again, is part of a natural process. And as to what that percentage looks like out of 7 billion is anybody's guess. But certainly for me, it's like an innate impulse. And I think it is in a lot of people I meet to get to the truth of things and wondering why the place doesn't run so well. Again, if you go to these Nag Hammadi texts and go through them, although you have to kind of filter a lot of this Christian terminology out a little bit, when you get to the underlying message of it and you start to realize what is being said, then this issue that we face now, in 2012, is a very old one. And it's happened quite a few times. And it's just come into a kind of, as Terence McKenna would call it, a concrescence, where a lot of the energies are coming together and are accelerating or speeding up. The old stuff is kind of like beginning to fracture a little bit, but there's some amazing new stuff occurring. And certainly last year on my travels and studies and so on, particularly in meeting people face to face, of course, I've never met so many conscious, optimistic, powerful people ever. And that is very, very encouraging to me. And so that's why I think that it is a game at the top level, and it is an experiment to see if something that has got a problem can be fixed from a place of amnesia, basically. Because, of course, when we come in, we don't really know anything. We just have to guess everything and make a sort of best guess with integrity and honor and truth and intelligence as best we can. And that's the game, to see if that can bring through the harmony that wasn't there in the first place. So that is one cosmology, and there are many, but that's one that I quite like, and I think has a lot to teach us, even if it's not the only one. I'm not proposing that as the answer, but it's certainly something that is worthy of study and gives a lot of interesting avenues for exploration.
Now, I'm curious, in this model of I'm familiar with the idea of the demiurge and the sort of faulty universe, if you will, or the flawed universe. Now, a lot of what Sync shows, for certain people, Sync shows that it is a perfect universe, that if you can show this sort of divine order and everything, then we already are in the perfect universe, and that it's not flawed. Is this that's something that a lot of people, a conclusion that a lot of people come to. Now I wonder if, again, as it's that sort of as above, so below, as within, so without, as you start doing that inner work, is that sort of view of the outside world, are we repairing it? Are we, while we're doing the inner work, are we also, almost like Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits, are we repairing the sort of flaws in the grand architect's plans by just as the universe?
Yeah, the architect's plan is perfect, if we can use that word. That's the way I feel. The design is supreme, and again, as you say, you don't have to look very far into the sort of synchro-mystical nature of this thing to determine that. Like I say in my little piece in your book, just look into the head of a sunflower and you start to realize there's something pretty amazing occurring. And it, as you say, fractally at every level that occurs with humans, with plants, with nature, with design, with art, with everything. The design itself is good. The problem was the execution of that design, if you like. The person who actually constructed it did it from a place of ego, did it from a place of thinking, I'm the big man, and this is my universe. And so whenever that happens, as indeed in our own personal lives, everything tends towards its own end, entropy, the third law of thermodynamics or whatever. And we accept that as well. That's just the way it is. And it is to some extent. It's hard to argue that. Many physicists, I'm sure, could line up and pretty much persuade anybody that that's the way it kind of functions. But the point is, as you say, that as you start to see that and you bring your own harmony into it, you can sort of revivify that design and say, okay, the design is good, but as conscious co-creators, as aspects of the divine, which I firmly know that we are, you have the ability to bring that harmony back to any point in the design that you make contact with, whether in abstract thinking, whether emotionally, whether physically, whether in your food, whether in your journeys, whether in your music. Everything you do, every time you contact the design, you have the capacity to reharmonize it and to bring it back into a state of natural coherence that potentially wasn't there in the first place. So, yes, you can see the patterns, but the execution of those patterns and the articulation of them only really works from a position of harmony. So that's why it's kind of like always a good result in the end, because you can't really mess that pattern up, because it just fizzles out if it's done from a place of decoherence. If it's done from a place of harmony, it tends towards self-sustaining practice, just like in permaculture or something. It tends to find its own equilibrium, and that's what this is about. It's about reintegrating opposites, bringing light and shadow together, and understanding that the cracks in the world and the weird stuff in the world, that we don't like, is fixable. But no one else is going to come along and do it. The whole point is that we do it in ourselves, and the universe learns from us just as much as we learn from it.
Beautifully said. We only have a few minutes left in the live broadcast. Would you like, if you're willing to follow us over into the after show, gladly do that. But maybe you want to address your upcoming book in the last few minutes here?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, over 2011, the second half of 2011, I was pretty solidly writing, and I've finished my book, which is called The Unfoldment, and it will be released in spring. And there will be obviously updates on the website and stuff, and the publishers will put their own materials out, and I'll be talking about that and going to different events and so on. But yeah, the book really is a sort of synthesis of a lot of the things I talk about, and my experiment with the book is to try and bring that information to people who know nothing about any of this. So although old hands and wise old wizards wandering about the planet might pick it up and find it useful, hopefully, certainly my satisfaction and my fulfillment that's easy to do that. But what's really an exciting challenge is to get, the woman you stood next to in the dentist's waiting room to pick it up and have a look at it and actually take something valuable away from it. So it is pretty comprehensive, but it's also very approachable as well. So that's been my intention with this, to try and, strike a chord with people who know that things are changing and maybe feel a bit uncertain about that, and really put empowerment into people's hands. So it is a very transformative book, but it's about power as well, and claiming that back for ourselves, really, rather than imagining that it's something that is bestowed upon us or is something that exists outside of us. It's claiming that within ourselves. So that's what it's about.
When the going gets weird, the weird go pro, huh?
I like it.
Here's ending. Well, a quote from your piece in the Think book. Towards the end, you say, "Our life is a journey. We illustrate it with our unique and miraculous stories." And we were talking about the death card at the beginning. And this past Christmas, I was given a new set of tarot cards. It's called the Wildwood. And instead of a medieval or Egyptian symbol set, they use like a pagan or Celtic symbol set. And for the death card, it's called the Journey. And I just thought that was
nice. Yeah, I like it. Very, very appropriate.
Yeah.
So how much time we got?
Got a couple minutes to wrap it up.
Okay, so can I bring this up? At the end of Brazil, is he? How do we put it? Is he getting out of the sort of trap of, is he sort of come through the dark unveiling and he's gone inside to do the interior work, or is he, there's so much out there. It's the idea of, this is mind control, and you're creating, a sort of MK Ultra like altar or prison in your own mind. What do you have hope for Sam Lowry at the end of Brazil? Where do you stand on him?
Yeah, I do have hope for him. I think it's reality tunnels. I think from the reality tunnel of Brazil, which is essentially modern day Britain come to life in the real world, that is the reality tunnel, and he's fucked basically. From a different reality tunnel, he's completely understood what's going on around him, and the character played by De Niro is his own hero, and it's only where he loses faith that dissipates, really. And I think he starts to realize through love, to give it a nice ending, that there's another way of doing it. So I think the parallel reality tunnels are both as relative and as real as each other. So it depends through which lens you're looking at, and certainly Gilliam likes to always switch that about. So you're left with that question mark, but I think it's very conscious question mark. I think he's saying that's up to you what you want to do, So both those realities split off.
And okay, and that's up to you what to do.
Yeah, they both